So we just start, and I'll introduce you a little bit using this bio
Okay.
that's here. So, hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real. By now, you know that this podcast is all about having conversations that matter with people who matter. And I need to tell you that my guest today is one of the people who matters most to me in my whole life. This is my friend and colleague and soul sister and birthday buddy, Jennifer Mallory. Welcome, Jennifer.
I'm so happy to be here and I can't wait to talk.
I know, right? We don't have any trouble talking, and that's what we do on Get Real. So let me introduce you to Jen if you don't know her. Jennifer Mallory is a rare breed of leader. And this is, I'm reading her bio, but this is very true in my experience with her as well. She is trusted by clients and competitors alike. She's a forward thinker, and she built a career on her ability to skate where the puck is going. You said, Jen, you have something that you want to tell me about that, so I'm looking
Yes.
forward to that.
Yeah.
She honed her skills at powerhouse companies like ABC News and Keller Williams. She is now an ICF certified human potential coach and a certified mental fitness coach. She combines techniques of traditional productivity coaching, which we all know we need to be better at our productivity, right? With the latest discoveries in human potential research. And Jen and I participated in positive intelligence coaching, and there's a lot more I could tell you about her bio. Your bio's amazing, Jen, but I want to get into the conversation, so we'll get into
Yeah, let's
some of
just
the
go.
ingenious coaching and all of that good stuff as we go. But Jen lives
Yeah.
in New York, and I have never, well, we probably have met in person somewhere along the line, but we don't remember that because we didn't really know each other when we were in the same industry. But we've become really close friends in the last couple of years. COVID helped that, Jen, because Zoom is
Absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah.
Many happy hours on Zoom.
Yeah. Well, and you know what I think we both sort of realized is that while a lot of people say, "Oh, Zoom is terrible," that Zoom fatigue, for me, Zoom was a lifeline,
I know.
and I developed really great friendships with people, and the group that I run, people meet each other and they say, it feels like I've known you forever.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
let's start there. Would you just start there with the group you run, Ingenious Women, and tell us about that, and then we'll get into you, who you are.
Oh, so Ingenious Women is my give back. As you know, it's my love, and it's my version of what you do on Get Real, except for I do it in a live group setting. And I started it pre-COVID, really thinking it was going to be a group of women who met locally to support each other in business development, a way to get to know people and trust people and do business together.
Mhm.
And then COVID.
Right.
It went online, and suddenly I had people, women from Australia and Ireland and Germany, all over the world, looking
Russia.
for a place. Oh yes, now I have, yes, now I've got I've got Russia still, which is interesting. Um, and so it became really a place that it's really evolved, and it's less about business per se, and it's more about the skills that we need to develop that our parents didn't teach us for a world they could never imagine. And this is particularly resonant with women because of the way that the world is changing right now and women's voices being amplified and really stepping into a different level of leadership for women. And it's great. I love it. And we do it every week, and we talk about a topic that people can take out into the world as a new kind of skill. So
Was that your intention when you started this, that it would
no,
end up where it is?
no, not at all. I had no idea. But as I have grown as a person and I have stepped into myself and my skills and really being true to what I want to deliver to the world, I suddenly realized I was lacking this whole skill set that was needed to be powerful in an emergent world where we see technology like never before. We've got lots of issues, problems that are coming up with the economy and the environment, and we have new levels of understanding of what diversity and equity and inclusion means. And all of these things are coming together in a way that we don't have a skill set. We haven't been trained in a skill set for how to integrate all of these things in a way that's going to make us thriving as a society. And that's what we're doing. That's what I'm doing.
So that kind of happened a couple of years ago, but that is one of your latest iterations. I, as always, I know on Get Real, it's always interesting to me, and I hope to my listeners, to find out how the person who is talking to me today got to be the person you are today. And so the way I love to learn about that is where you came from. You were kind of mentioning we weren't given these skill sets, we weren't trained in these ways. So could you start from, where you were born, how you got where you are today?
Oh my
Small,
gosh.
small little question.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a Midwestern girl. I was born outside of Chicago. I grew up in Chicago, came east to go to school, college. I was raised in a very traditional family. I have three brothers, and I was the only girl. Um, so there's that word, when I was growing up, um, I wasn't allowed to play sports, and it was about dance lessons and music for me. And there were certain things that a young lady did, including knowing how to dress. I was not allowed to wear pants until I was in fifth grade. So I
No, I
had,
just need to step in here and say you're not that old, Jennifer. So the fact that you're talking about something that to me would be something that you might hear in the 50s, you were raised in the 80s, 70s and 80s, right? I mean, this is not that long
no,
ago.
actually, I was raised in the 60s and the 70s.
Well, yeah, you're younger
Okay,
than I
there's
am.
that.
I like to make myself feel younger, but you're younger than I am. So you were in high school in the 80s.
1980, I went to high school. Yep.
Yeah. So before that, when you think about it's not that long ago that,
Right. Yeah.
girls were playing sports. Other girls,
I wasn't allowed. That was not something that was available to me.
was that religious? Was it how was it the way your parents were raised?
Um, my mom in particular was very proper. I don't think my mother ever owned a pair of pants. I never ever saw her wear a pair of pants, and she was very really well dressed, uh, well mannered. She had definite ideas about how you showed up in society, and um, being nice was the number one. One of her number one qualities was being nice, and so I remember as a young woman in high school, there was an icky boy who liked me, and he would come over to the house, and she would make me sit with him and have Coke and sit with this icky boy in the living room because that's what you did when you were nice.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
That programs a lot of things, doesn't it?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And so but I also, if I can get real and honest, I always felt from the time that I was a little girl that there was something wrong with me because I had three brothers. And I noticed that there was a difference. And when I was little, I asked my mom why I was missing a part.
Mm.
So there was always something with me that felt that there was something missing
Mm.
because I wasn't a boy.
Right.
And I noticed that I was treated differently because I was a girl. So there was more controls on where I was and who I was with. Um, my brothers were just off doing doing whatever. And from my perspective too, it was about how I was going to help my mom and what needed to be done in the house. So my brothers, the three of them, all split the lawn, and I did everything else.
Yeah. What birth order were you?
I'm number two.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. That's it. That's just interesting to me, having been raised with only one sister. I'm the oldest of two girls, and that it never even occurred to me that gender was an issue in my upbringing. So to hear that for you, because there was a distinction, there was contrast, is really interesting. Because knowing you as I do, there's a lot that impacts us as adults that if we can't uncover, we are subject to the results of for our entire adult existence.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's, I think the work you've done on you and with you and for your clients has allowed you to break through some of those barriers, yet knowing and doing are not always synonymous and
Right.
simultaneous.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it was, I've always been, I think partially as a result, I've always been super competitive, because I had to be. Yeah, and yeah, I'm super competitive, but I was the only one. My father said to me years later, he said, we never allowed you to play sports, and you're the only one who ever won a medal in a sport.
Oh, wow.
Because after I got out of college, I started doing triathlons. And my first triathlon that I did, I came in third place.
Wow.
Yeah. Um, so they were always very like, oh my God, none of my brothers did anything like
Yeah.
that. And I
How,
was, yeah.
how did you channel that competitiveness when you were, let's say in high school, when you were living with your parents?
Oh boy, that's a whole story that I don't know if I want to get into
We can
here.
take that.
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, if this is something I want you to know, but maybe something that I am not ready to share with the
Yeah.
world. My mother had a nervous breakdown when I was in high school, and I ended up really having to take care of the family. She didn't get out of bed.
Mm.
She stopped cooking, stopped cleaning, and um, so it was really up to me to step up and take care of things, and also to be the one where everybody could point to and say, there's nothing wrong in our family.
Mhm.
Look at how well she's doing. Because, all of my brothers are addicted to different substances. All three of them, my oldest brother and my youngest brother, are alcoholics. My middle brother was an alcohol, he had problems with alcohol and is a gambler. My youngest brother is he's a victim of the opioid. He
Mm.
was a heroin addict for a while. So all of them were just completely a mess. And I'm the one that everybody can point to and say, nothing wrong here.
Yeah. And I'm confident that your story is way more typical than any of us would want to admit, because we're so good at hiding things in
Yeah.
our lives. We're so good, and we're not great at being real. We don't know how to be real. We're not given permission, and not that we need permission, but it feels like we do sometimes. And so some of that early conditioning and programming for you, I'm making an assumption, had something to do with you going east to college.
Oh my gosh. When I was looking at colleges, I couldn't wait to get out of there. I was desperate to leave. And I was terrified because I was certain that my family was just going to fall apart when I left. And so I didn't know what to do. And my grandfather took me out for lunch one day and he said, you must leave. Whatever happens with your family is going to happen for them, but you deserve to have your life. And in order to do that, you need to leave.
Wow.
And so he gave me permission, and I went to the school that was the farthest away from home that I had been accepted at, which ended up in the East where I didn't know anybody. And that's where I went. And, my friends who know me well say, your grandfather saved your life, because if you had stayed back there, you would have been just as addicted as your brothers.
Wow. Wow. There's some wisdom to that. There's some wisdom to
Yeah.
maybe what people know, but don't want to admit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So your grandfather could see it, knew it. And maybe we know these things and we try to disguise them or hide them with our addictions and with our habits and the things. Maybe we are wiser than we want to admit, and we hide
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that I realized too, I was so angry at my mother for so many years because she really, she was alcoholic, and she probably had a mental illness, but would not talk to anybody about it because there was such a stigma. And I was so angry with her for such a long time because I felt like she had handed me a life that I didn't want.
Mhm. I can understand.
Um, yeah, but it took me years and years to unwind it and get to the point where I said, my mother loved me with all of her heart in the way that she could, and she didn't have available to her what I have available. She wouldn't have been able to have this concept of skills that her mother didn't teach her, for a world that she couldn't imagine,
Mhm.
because she didn't have access. She didn't have access to conversations with people like you, and maybe she wasn't open in her heart to find it for herself, whatever reason that was. She died about 6 years ago. And after she died, I really went on a journey to heal what my relationship looked like with her so that I could show up different in the world.
Mm. So 6 years, then a lot has happened in the last 6 years for you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, totally. I have a completely different life than I had 6 years
Mm.
ago, right?
I've only known you in the last 6 years, or within the last 6 years, so I didn't know who you were before this.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But we worked at the same company, so you know a
Mhm.
little bit about what that was like,
Mhm.
and you also know that I got to a point where it was so out of alignment with who I am and who I wanted to be that I basically, my body just said, "Okay, stop, not doing this anymore." And I woke up one day and I just knew that I had to leave. And so I did. And I
Mhm.
left, and I started a coaching company. I went back, I got two different certifications. I got remarried to a wonderful, wonderful human being. I reconstructed my relationships with my children, with my dad. Um, yeah, I'm in a totally different place.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Was it a breakdown to get to a breakthrough, or what was it, do you think, if you look back?
Um, so I was thinking about this the other day. I'm huge. As I mentioned before, I'm super competitive, and you know that the job that we were in before was a very competitive kind of job, and so I ground myself into it, basically forcing myself to do this job that was really sucking my soul. And when that happened, I had no, and I would get home at 6 o'clock after picking my kids up from daycare, and I was so exhausted that I would just put pasta on the stove and feed them pasta with butter and then put them to bed. And that was it. That was my life. It was awful. I wasn't working out. They would go to bed. I would have wine because I needed to unwind. And one of my friends said to me, "Come on, you're just no fun anymore. I used to be so much fun. Let's go out. So we're going to go do karaoke. Come on." And I was like, last thing I want to do is karaoke. So I went out and I did karaoke. And the next day, somebody posted this picture of me on Facebook, and it was me singing karaoke. And I was like, oh. So here I am, this sad looking middle aged woman whose clothes weren't fitting well anymore because she wasn't taking care of herself. And standing up there singing karaoke and pretending to have a good time, it was the most pathetic I think I've ever felt in my entire life.
Mm.
And I looked at that picture and I said, I'm not doing this. I'm not living this way for the rest of my life, because that is so not who I want to be. And that started me, that picture, that night of karaoke started me on the journey to what I wanted to do, how I wanted to change. And shortly after that night, another dear friend of mine came to me and said, "You're having a breakdown. I'm taking you with me to meditation. My brother did transcendental meditation. He's a CEO of a company and he did it and he's so much better. And she took me to transcendental meditation, and that started to change everything.
Wow. And
Yeah.
now in the 6 years, is this before the 6 years?
It was right. It was in the beginning of the 6 years.
Okay. So Jen, this isn't a very long journey at this point. It's only 6 years for you. I mean, when you think about it, that's not very long to have been on this new path where I've known you. I've been doing
It
this
is
work since
not.
2003. So this is this is really impressive. Um, and it could be a lot of hope for people who might find themselves in a similar place without realizing it, without having a picture that they can see of themselves. Because I think if people aren't honest, don't you think people are, they know, don't you think deep down that things aren't working out or aren't the way they would like them to be?
I think so. But for me, it took courage to admit that,
Mhm,
because I had a picture in my mind of what I should be based upon how I was raised. The women in my family all went to, in my father's family, all went to college. They all had advanced degrees, and they all um, didn't work. They all volunteered their time and they did amazing things, but it was time that they gave away.
mhm,
And so I lived in this really uncomfortable space of feeling like I'm not a guy, but I want to go out and make something in the world. I've got great education, but I have to give it away because that's what women do.
mhm,
And it took me a while to unwind
mhm,
that, and yeah, and get comfortable integrating those things, because here I am competitive.
mhm, mhm. So
Yeah.
so TM started it, it sounds like.
TM started it. Yeah.
And then what was the next, or how did that journey take off from there?
um so I started TM, and then I realized, because I mentioned that I had done triathlons when I was younger, so I was really into working out and physically fit, and I just wasn't anymore, and I didn't really have the energy to do that. So I started biohacking, and I was playing around with my diet. And so once I started integrating biohacking into my life, I started getting energy back. And then once I got more energy, I went and I added high intensity interval training to that, so that that piece happened. I don't do transcendental meditation anymore, but I do a wide variety of different kinds of meditation that have different functions within my life. And so I really have built my life around this idea of biohacking, controlling psychology, biology, and environment to live the best version of yourself. And so when I decided that I was going to be a coach, there is a biohacking coaching certification, which is what I have. Human potential, it comes
So
out of that.
I'm gonna make an assumption that not everybody who's listening knows what biohacking is. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's the science of aligning psychology, biology, and environment to live a thriving life.
And it's an actual like study path,
Oh,
or is it okay?
yes. It is a big, yeah. Do you know anything about it
I
personally?
know a bit, but I don't know enough to be an expert and explain it.
So
So
you and I have never had this
no,
conversation
you've
before?
talked about it, you've talked around it, you've said, you know, I do this, and I said, yeah, well, but no.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, this is, and I do all I do all of these different things to really manage myself. And one of the things that I noticed about myself and I see with other people is that when we start getting older, we don't necessarily learn much about how to take care of our body as it ages. We want to do the things we did when we were younger, and it doesn't work that way anymore. So with what biohacking does is allows me to work with my body as it's aging and changing to make sure that I'm keeping my energy levels up so that I can do all the things that I want to do. I did sort of get into it because of there's a lot of ties in the biohacking community to longevity. And I don't want to, I know I can't live forever. I don't want to live forever, but I want to live every single day as healthy as possible. So I don't end up like my mom. My mom had 4 kinds of cancer and emphysema, and she was mentally ill. And when she died at 70, the day after her 74th birthday,
Mm.
and I don't want that to be. I choose to have a different story.
Yeah. So biohacking, so transcendental meditation, biohacking, and then you just added other things. You kept adding coaching certifications, and I know you did the Landmark Forum. We've talked about positive intelligence. So just keep going.
God,
Tell me,
I've done a lot of stuff.
you have done a lot of stuff, and only in the time I've known you. I mean, there's a lot of things you've added since I've known you.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's true. Well, thank you for pointing that out because
Yeah.
sometimes I feel.
Well, because you're in it. I mean, you don't
Yeah,
always
yeah,
see, we don't see what we're in, right? It's the forest and the trees. I don't see the trees when I'm in the forest.
yeah,
Sometimes
yeah,
we just need somebody to notice what we have forgotten. So
yeah.
there's a lot, Jen, and the landmark form is no easy thing. And you did it virtually. I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
I did it in person. So
Yeah. Well, it actually worked out better for me because um, I control when I go to sleep very carefully, and it would be very hard for me to do to go into New York City to have to do the forum in person. So it sort of worked out okay.
so COVID, another COVID blessing right there.
Another COVID blessing. Well, and I got my certification, my human potential certification during COVID as well. And that was something that they started offering online in, so COVID to me had a lot of gifts.
Yeah. So we could talk about Landmark forever. I know that well. It really, really changed my life in 2003 when I did the whole curriculum. But I don't want to spend the time talking about that here. I want to talk more about PQ and what you've learned and how that's impacted you. And then I'd like you to just share that so that other people can experience that if they feel called to.
All right. So PQ is short for positive intelligence quotient. And so PQ is a methodology that uh, it's called mental fitness. And what it does is it breaks the negative thought patterns that show up to sabotage your life. And I was certified in this technique. I started with the technique because I felt I needed it. I'm a little bit of you and I are a little bit, personal development junkies.
Mhm.
But being a longtime meditator, I really wanted a way of integrating meditation into my day in a more usable method. So I have been a meditator and I do it religiously, but during the middle of the day when things are really hectic, you're not really going to stop and go, okay, wait a minute, I need everything to be quiet and I need, just 15 minutes to shut things down. So what I found in PQ is a way to access the peace and calm and clear-headed focus that comes from meditation in just 2 minutes throughout the course of the day. And what this allows us to do, as you know, is to break those thought, those patterns of thought that we all fall into from conditioning through our entire life that control our behavior without us even being aware.
Mm-hmm.
So I got certified in this technique, and you know that I run, and you have taken it, and you
Mm-hmm.
still do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
It's I love the way you just described that, and chatting with our mutual friend the other day who reiterated that from her perspective, someone else who was in your next course who lives in my town, who just was she overheard me talking to the person I was having coffee with, and she said, you need to hear about this, to him. She didn't even know him. So I introduced the two of them. We were sitting in a booth back to back, and I just leaned out of the way, and he was sitting this way and she was sitting this way, and they just had the conversation. So without even being prompted, she felt compelled to say how much it had changed her and how much it had enhanced her experience in a kind of a challenging career she has.
Yes, yes, very challenging career. Yeah,
And and so I love that reminder. And it is exactly what you said. It's a way to break those neural pathways that just
yes,
aren't serving us.
yes. And those are the things that cause us to behave in ways that it shows up as negative. This all right. So this is a little bit hard to explain. It's so any negativity that you have that's showing up in your life, most of it is caused by how we perceive things, right? Because everything that's going on around you is just happens. There's
Mhm.
no emotional content in anything that happens in your life. It's just happenings. What makes it emotional is the way that we deal with it. And we get set in these patterns over time of dealing with things in a particular way that doesn't serve us really well, right? So we have this negativity bias because of how our biology is set up that causes us to automatically go more towards negative behaviors as a way of trying to keep ourselves safe. And what PQ does is it disconnects that automaticity that leads us into the negative without us really even thinking about it. And it gives us the space to make a different choice, right? It's, Viktor Frankl and his saying that between the stimulus and the response, there's a space.
Mhm.
And PQ is the method to get to that space.
Mhm. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
You do courses in that. You lead cohorts studying this over a, is it 6 week, 8 week?
It's 8 weeks now. It's changed
Okay.
since you did it
Uh-huh.
because the Grow, which you're part of, is
Yep.
now two modules of Grow are included in the course. So it is a 6 week course that will teach you how to uh, disconnect from the negative thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that are driving you, to identify which ones of them are causing you trouble, and then to develop the mental muscle to be able to direct your attention into a more productive and fulfilling energy. So there's 5 different techniques that you can use then once you get into that space that allows you to make a different choice in your life, and it's really unbelievable. It
And
applies
you're,
every
what, say that again?
it applies everywhere in your life, everywhere.
Now, when I look back on you only knowing PQ for what, 2 years,
Yeah,
even 2 years,
yeah.
I'm looking at I'm looking at you in connecting the dots looking backward, right? So I'm being objective about what I'm observing for you. And it feels to me like your life is, let's say, this long, but the last 6 years are just condensed acceleration
Mm.
in your awareness, which has propelled you into different action, which has released you from patterns and um, thoughts and programming that you didn't even know existed until you did. And so, in these 6 years with the biohacking, with everything, when you look back, it's no accident that everything happened the way it happened
Right.
for you in your
Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah. It's 100%. It's true, and I feel like there's a lot of healing. One of the things I become really aware of is a lot of those negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions we have are actually handed down to us by our ancestors because they're the ones who teach us about the world, and we end up living their biases. We end up living their perspectives, and we end up living their traumas in a lot of cases. And one of the things that I discovered in all of this work that I'm doing is the trauma. that was handed down in my mother's family.
Mhm.
And it is the reason why she ended up the way that she did. And my great work is for my children and my nieces and nephews to stop that trauma and to uh, live a different story. And that's what I mean by having skills for a world that your parents couldn't imagine. So I've developed a whole set of skills that were never given to me, not out of not loving, but about not knowing, right?
And as you talk about, you're kind of describing cellular memory and generational trauma and things that I had an acquaintance who was German today. I mean, not today, but 10 years ago when I met her. And she said, we Germans carry guilt. It's what we train our family. It's the way we live our lives because we don't know anything else. We have generational trauma and cellular memory that carries guilt because of what Hitler did and what happened and what we allowed to happen and all this stuff. And so when you think about the race issues we're having right now and the everything that we're experiencing as heavy right now in the world we live in, seems to me that given the opportunity to learn what you're teaching right now, there is a possibility that this could be altered in the future.
Oh gosh, definitely. I was thinking about it today and I thought, how many people, how many of us, when we look at what we're trying to do in our life, we think we're not disciplined, or we think that we don't manage our time well, or we think we're procrastinators, right? But it's not that. And how much I've spent thousands of hours and probably thousands of dollars learning techniques to try to overcome where I thought I was not disciplined or where I thought I was procrastinating. And really, what I discovered was, and those never worked. They worked for a little while, right? Remember time block, like block your calendar, make it different colors, all of that. Yeah, I could do that for about 2 weeks, right? Um, and then I'd be on to something else because it was too hard to keep up. Well, the thing that I realized, I'm none of those things. Those are my saboteurs coming out to play. And those are my negative thought patterns. So as soon as I can break those negative thought patterns, I'm not disciplined. It's just I need to know about the thought pattern that causes me to look like I'm not disciplined. And then once I do, my stuff gets done.
Mm.
So that's that stimulus response thing again. Um, that mental fitness, what it really does is it gets you to the root level of what the issue is instead of being um, uh, just something to take care of the symptom, which a lot of these things that I'm talking about, they just take care of the symptom, but they don't get to the root cause. And if you don't get to the root cause, things don't go away.
Oh, there's so many parallels. I mean, there are just so many things. I'm thinking about Dr. Pimple Popper.
One of my favorites.
And she'll say all the time, if you don't get the whole thing out, it will come back.
Yeah.
And biologically, we're not talking psychologically when we're talking about that with her. It's biological. I mean, it is what it is. If you don't get the bad stuff out, whatever's causing the bad thing to happen, it will come back. It makes perfect rational sense. And then I'm thinking about even grammatically what you said. I don't know if you recognize that you said this, but I'm an English major. I'm a grammar hound. You said when I identify the part of me that resists the time blocking and that I can do for 2 weeks and I get into more of what I would, you didn't say it like this, but I heard you say like a flow state or a state that's more in alignment with who you are. You said things get done. You did
Yes.
say I do things.
Oh, yes. Yes. It's so true. Yeah. All right. So this is getting into this something that I discovered recently that I was like so excited to share with you. Um, so I was thinking about how to explain this. All right. So everything that's happening in the world around us, we have to use our senses in order to put it together. But our senses have to collect all of the data, send the data up into our brain. Our brain needs to recognize it. So what this means is that we are automatically living a split second after things really happen.
Mhm.
Things are happening. It's taking me a minute to collect what it is, right?
Mhm.
So if I'm doing that, I'm automatically always living in the past,
Yeah, you're never in the present. Yeah.
never in the present. And then if I am waiting for the stimulus to come into my brain, it means that the whole flood of memories that are attached to whatever that is present right away. But if I can put my attention on the millisecond before my body actually is aware, that's where change is possible.
That's where transformation will happen, right? So this is what I'm learning at NLP training. And it's neuro linguistic programming, and how we've been automatically programmed without our permission, without our awareness. And again, nobody did this on purpose, at least not in my experience.
No,
This
not in my world either. Yeah.
yeah. So it was something that I understand that people were doing the best they could with what they knew. So if we're not putting our own understanding into our unconscious mind on purpose, it's being done for us, to us, about us. And what you're saying is, if I get that millisecond before my body reacts, you are actually in charge of your own programming.
There's nothing there. It's where all possible that everything is possible because I'm not dragging whatever is in my future and responding from that.
Mhm.
I'm a millisecond ahead. And it's really funny that I think I've always been that way. I just haven't let myself be that way. And
Mhm.
that's what that means in my bio. Skate where the puck is going.
Mhm.
I have in my entire career, we didn't talk about how I ended, what I did beforehand, but I've always been in very pioneering careers. Um, and that's what that
Mhm.
is that's what that means. Be able to skate where the puck is going is in to to be that millisecond ahead.
So it's intuition, I would guess. It's some sort of
It's
listening.
awareness.
Aware,
It's
yeah.
putting your it's put it it's putting your awareness onto so everything that's happening is just energy.
Mhm.
That's all it is. And everything is just a different vibration of energy that then we, take all our senses, we put it together, and that's what creates the world that we live in. So that in that millisecond, it's perceiving just the energy before it turns into what we perceive as real.
There's so much there.
This is what I've been walking around practicing for the past couple of days, just being in that space of, I call it the millisecond, just being in the millisecond everywhere in my relationships, when I'm driving my car. And what it does is it totally stops that there's no mental chatter. It's just, I'm standing there just looking like, this is so cool.
I'm so glad you've articulated this in this way, because I have known this as well, but I've never articulated it. I look back on things that attracted me or were common in what I was interested in. And only in hindsight and in retrospect can I connect these dots. Everything seems to have been pointing in, this conversation, pointing to this conversation right now, which is not even surprising to me anymore. It used to be like, oh my God, can you even imagine? Oh, no, no, no. I'm crystal clear that I have a purpose, not a reason. I can't figure out the reason. And I think the fact that we came together when we did, when you and I met each other, I mean, some of the things that nobody in my experience has language for, you've just articulated. Um, and if they could articulate that, like you've said, that's where the realm of possibility exists. That's what Einstein was talking about, right? The theory of relativity. Uh,
Yes.
this is not new, but it's radical. That's why R is radical of real, right? You said it's not real. It's not real, but the real that we can put together is radical because nobody else is doing it. Radical means getting back to the root, radish root. It doesn't mean crazy out there. Let's radicalize people and, have them believe something other than, well, that's not
Yep.
it. It's the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And then the E is energized. It's for the reasons you were just talking about. When we get radically energized or radically aware of our energy, then authenticity follows automatically.
Love it.
And being learning focused means I'm always on the lookout for more. What more can I, use your terms earlier, what more can I biohack? What more can I add to my experience of living the life I'm living so that I can be an example and not a warning to others?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what came up for me, if you don't mind me sharing this with
Please.
Elle, it's also for me about listening
Mhm.
and about being able to listen at a different level. And I've learned a lot about listening through meditation because you listen in a different way. And one of the things that I have learned, the L,
Mhm.
is that you really never learn anything except for through your own experience. You can gather information, but it doesn't become the true known until you live it.
Yeah. Oh, yes. It's theory. It's theory until it's put into practice. And there's a ton of theory.
Right. And I could get lost in the learning, the
Yeah.
collecting. I collect, I'm like a magpie of information, collect it all the time. But unless I take a moment or time and step back and listen, I don't necessarily see how all of it connects.
Mm.
Right. The listening for me is really when I start putting everything together.
Mhm. We could continue this and we will. We'll have other, other episodes that lead to the next version of the conversation. But for now, for this first one, if people are intrigued at all by this conversation and would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
On my website, Ingenious, the Ingenious Coach,
Okay.
Ingenious, which means creative, resourceful, and original. Um, you can connect with me there.
So I will put that, I'll make sure that we have a link, the Ingenious Coach. There's a lot of opportunities with PQ. You can work with Jen on PQ. You could work with Jen on the Ingenious Women uh, conversation. You could hire her as a one-on-one coach for you. You could, at some point, we will do a retreat together. I'm just
Oh, I
putting
can't
that out there.
wait.
And something like that will happen. And
I can't wait for that. It'll be so
yeah,
fun.
so this is what it means to have a real dialogue where we suspend previous assumptions for the purpose of learning from each other and allowing the best of both of us to come into the conversation, which is the mastermind. And so if you're listening and you can go back and pinpoint the times when that happened, I know I can. And I was not, Jen, we didn't prepare for this. We didn't
No, not at all. We didn't go
together.
anywhere near where I thought. I thought we were going to be talking about truth, reality, and leadership. That's what
And
that's what I had on my list.
we'll talk about that next time. Because this is what I want to do when I kind of dig in with the human who's in charge of the resources for the world, right? The human has to come first. And the conversations about we as spiritual beings having a human experience are what set the stage for truth and leadership and those other kinds of things.
And well, you
So
know what? Thank you for doing this and having these conversations because they are real I don't know if they're what everybody else is thinking about, but it's what's on my mind. And I think that it takes courage to stand up and be real. And thank you for your courage in leading the conversation.
Well, thank you for playing. Thank you for coming into the space and adding so much to it. So everybody, thank you for being with me today. And as always, get real. Okay, that's the end of that. And then I'll stop recording here. Yeah.